Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and G.skill decided to send over one of these kits of Trident Z Royal Elite memory in the 4000 CL14 spec, 2x8 gigs, Samsung B-die of course, because it's 14, 15, 1535 at 1.55 volts, and even with 1.55 volts, the vast majority of ICs will not do a TRCD of 15 at 4000 megabits per second data rates. So, yeah, this is basically some of the highest quality Samsung B-die that you can buy, and that is certainly reflected in the price tag, as these are not cheap sticks. So yeah, currently this kit goes for like almost $300 on Newegg, and so yeah, it is really, really expensive. And it is just single rank Samsung B-die, so I wouldn't build the daily system around it. But as a competitive overclocker, this is actually a really, really cool kit of memory because you don't have to bin it. Like, you shouldn't really have to bin it. Like, for comparison, the XMP spec of this kit is not really doable on the vast majority of Samsung B-die that I own. Like, this is just not something you regularly see random kits do. And also, XMP specs will have some headroom generally built into them, because you never really, like, it's kind of like how CPUs have overclocking headroom and GPUs have overclocking headroom. Like, nothing is ever shipped from the factory completely maxed out, because that is really, like, not cost effective to do. So yeah, this is basically, like, if you're into competitive overclocking and you want to get yourself like a super strong single rank Samsung B-die set on an A2 PCB, it's of course A2, so that's the modern high-speed PCB. Really, like, some people defend the A0 PCB. I have no idea why. Like, everything you can do on A0 you can do on A2, but A0 won't do the speeds that an A2 PCB will. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. So if you want like super high quality Samsung B-die on an A2 PCB, on a actually also really good A2 PCB, this exists, and it basically saves you the effort of having to bin a bunch of like lower spec kits that, sure, they might be like half the price, but you're probably going to have to buy more than two of them before you find a kit this good. So, if you're even going to find one at all, right? Like, there's no guarantee that you're going to find a really great kit binning lower spec kits. If you just bin enough lower spec kits, like, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to get what you're looking for doing that. And anyway, so since this is a, like, super bin of Samsung B-die, the only real question or the only question I care to answer with it is, what does it do at like benchmark settings? Not stuff for day-to-day usage. And so we are on the Gigabyte X570S Aorus Master with my Ryzen 950 950X, and I decided to see how much it'll do with 2 volts. And the answer to that is it'll do much. It'll do very much. This is straight up the best Samsung V-die kit I've tested with this 5950X. Currently, it's right on the... I'm not sure that the kit is maxed out. I'm pretty sure the CPU is, though. So that's always the, you have your memory controller of the CPU, and there's the motherboard, and, memory overclocking. It's a long chain, and if any one thing in that chain doesn't really work optimally, then that makes things difficult. And I think my 5950X's memory controller is actually weaker than the memory controller of my 3700X. And this kind of confirms it. Oh man, this case is ridiculous. Okay, I think that's actually bugged out. Well, no, that might actually be correct. The issue is, like, because I've been benching this kit with the intent of actually getting like a high score for the 16-core Geekbench rankings. And as part of that, I've been really pushing the CPU to its limits. Like, my 5950X doesn't really seem to be that amazing. The primary CCX will only do a little over 4.7 gigahertz for Geekbench 3, and the secondary CCX will only do around 4.6. So the second CCX really sucks. Yeah, so this is the max score that I got for Geekbench when I was just going for like the overall score, where the CPU is really like right at the limit of, well, everything. And as you can see, my memory score there is only 10,909 points, whereas we just got over 11,000, which is like maybe this like it might now be a bit more stable since I'm not hammering the cores so damn hard. So we are going to rerun this because there is a bug with Geekbench where it can like I have a score where it spat out like 11,900 and I got really excited and then I read through the subtest and I was like, wait a minute, this is glitched out. So that's a potential issue that you can run into when you're right on the ragged edge like this. Makes me very suspicious of this right here, but this could just actually be because the CPU is now actually stable instead of, you know, right on the edge of not being able to run Geekbench, because the hardware bot score is, that score took way too much effort to produce, and the memory kit is a huge part of it being the score it is, because compared to other 5950Xs at around that level, I'm running much lower, like, well, I'm not really running that high CPU clocks because I'm cooling limited, and also I just don't think the silicon quality is that great. Okay, so it might be glitched out over there. Yeah, imagine if Geekbench was consistent for once. I can just keep rerunning it. Eventually it'll crash. So, yeah, basically I've just, like, slowed down, like, downclocked the CPU a little bit. So instead of 4.7 on the primary CCX, we're at, like, 4.675, and then the secondary is at 4.575. That was actually a really quick Dijkstra. But yeah, like, the thing is, this is the first memory kit that I've been able to do 4800 CL14 on Ryzen. I have other memory kits that'll do 4800 CL14 on Intel, but they need like 2.5 volts of memory voltage to do that, whereas this kit doesn't. And also, okay, I'm going to say this right here is actually glitched out slightly, because, yeah, we can't replicate that score right now. Either way, still, like, 10,800 points is still really high. For a memory score on a 5950X. Like, this is approaching the limits of what's possible. And I think if I actually downclock the CPU and then just, like, really focused on just pushing the memory, or if I even disabled the worst of my two CCDs, then, you know, I might be able to push the memory score even higher. But with the fully enabled 5950X, yeah, this is ridiculous. That is a absolutely massive memory score. Yeah, so a big part of what goes into producing a score like this, especially with Samsung B-Die, is that you actually have to disable a lot of your memory. Because when you're running high voltages on Samsung B-Die, it gets very unstable unless you restrict how much memory is accessible to Windows. So, like, this is a 16 gig memory kit, but as you can see, I only have 3 gigs of memory available in Windows here. And the reason for that is very simple. If we pull up msconfig, you'll see that you can go into advanced options over here, and you have this option called maximum memory, and I have that set to 3,888 megabytes, and somehow that translates into 3 gigs. So the thing is, this option is actually a little bit glitched out. Like, you need to, like, if you want 2.7 gigs of memory, I think you have to punch in like 3,000 megabytes. So yeah, the thing is, like, whatever you punch in here, you end up with a significantly smaller amount in your actual available memory that you end up with. So the problem with that is if you set this too low, you won't be able to get into Windows. But this is absolutely necessary to maintain stability when pushing this much voltage into a Samsung B-Die kit. Because, yeah, this is just sort of a thing that Samsung B-Die does. Like, there's other memory chips out there, like, say, Samsung E-Die, where you don't have to do this at all. It just, like, for whatever reason, that memory chip just doesn't care. Or actually, it's more like Samsung B-Die is weird in that it requires this, because most other memory chips aren't this sensitive to the maximum memory setting, but yeah. So this is what I'm referring to when I, like, mention maxmem in some of my other videos, is like this is the setting I'm talking about, because yeah, if you're pushing B-Die to the very limit, you need to start restricting how much memory is actually accessible for the OS, or it blue screens. So before you even get to the desktop, it'll blue screen. And you need to start doing this at around like 1.8 volts with most memory, with most B-die kits. Like up to around 1.75, you can get away with not having maximum enabled. But above that, you really need maximum. And the more voltage you use, the more maximum you need. Like the lower your maximum has to, like the less memory you have to have available in the OS. Now, it is actually per stick. It's not for like, so if we were using like a 32 gig kit, we could actually have more memory available because you should be thinking about this as 1.5 gigs of memory per memory stick, not like 3 gigs of memory total. It's just that each stick is 8 gigs. So if we had 16 gig sticks, then we could have 3 gigs of memory per stick. But yeah, anyway, and this is just like a regular thing that you have to do with Samsung B-die, and a 3 gigabyte maximum is actually quite high. You know, like I've done in the past when I've been pushing some of my other weaker kits, I'd be running like maximums as low as like 2 gigabytes, or I think my lowest, or even like 1.7 gigabytes sometimes. So yeah, 3 gigs of maximum is really not that low. Now let's take a look at the actual settings that we're running here. So yeah, slight BCLK overclock. Anything much higher, well, so yeah, very slight BCLK overclock, which like that's just because you know every little helps when you're because like right now I'm literally behind the next score up in on hardware bot by, if you look here, right, like I'm 95,456 points, 95,500 yeah, 95,500 points. So I'm 44 points away. So that's why there's the BCLK overclock was like, oh, just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. Was not enough. And actually the settings I ended up running were actually, so the hardware bot settings are 100.3 megahertz BCLK, 4.7 CCX on CCX0, 4.6 CCD0, CCD1 is at 4.6. Yeah, the FCLK, so this is not stable, right? Like, again, this is just for benchmarking. Geekbench is a benchmark that just isn't that sensitive in terms of stability, so I can get away with running that really high FCLK. Memory doing 4,800 megabits per second. Little bit under, actually, for the hardware bot run, it was 1.4 volts. The issue is the DFFT subtest of Geekbench gets really hot, so I can't actually run any more voltage than this, and even at one point, like, I'm thermally limited at this point. Like, it's not, like, more voltage actually makes the CPU less stable past this point. So, yeah, and I'm on a 280 millimeter AIO, so that's, you know, I really thought I'd have more headroom than that, but no. 1.2 volts SOC voltage. I think for the hardware bot run, I was slightly under that, but much less SOC voltage actually causes issues. Much more doesn't help. And, you know, I already have thermal issues, so even though the SoC doesn't really pull a lot of power, it's kind of like, I'd like to minimize heat output because the stability right now is very much temperature limited on the CPU. CPU VDD 18 voltage at 2.12 volts. This helps with improving the stability of the Infinity fabric. I've not actually been able to use that voltage to fix for long-term stability. I've not been able to really take advantage of that. But for just benchmarking, it clears up the FCLK stability enough that it'll fix your scores if you're having like performance regressions. It doesn't I've never had it actually completely fix the like random errors that you get with high Infinity fabric clocks. So yeah, again, that's just for benchmarking. Memory voltage at 2 volts. Unfortunately, like the X570S Master Aorus Master is a great memory overclocking board, right? It's got the shielded 6-layer daisy chain topology from Gigabyte on it. It just doesn't go over 2 volts of memory voltage. So, like, well, I'd like to see, like, in the future, I would really like to test. I'm definitely going to be testing what this kit will do with like 2.05 or even 2.1 volts, because there's headroom. There's still headroom in this kit. It actually, like, my other kits, which will kind of do 4800, really won't go over 4800. Like, even raising the BCLK this much for a lot of the other kits is just like, nope, it's going to stop posting. So, yeah, this kit, like, there's still room, but with this board, and also with this 5950X, like, this is the limit. And then 65 millivolts offset on the DDR VTT rail. which is just to help with stability at high voltages. Basically, from around 1.9 volts, you have to start lowering the VTT rail on most B-die memory kits, though there are some kits that don't care. They're kind of rare, though. But yeah, with this kit, minus 65 millivolts at 2 volts is enough to stabilize it. At higher voltages, I would expect it to actually require an even bigger negative VT termination offset, but well, we can't go over 2 volts, so that's not necessary right now. Now let's take a look at the memory timings, because those are, like, as low as it goes. Like, this would be low timings, even if we were at, like, 3800 megabits per second, but at 4800, well, that's why we're at 2 volts. But yeah, 14, 13, 8, 12, 24, 36 TRC. I actually pushed it lower for the hardware bot run. I think the hardware bot run is with a TRC of like 33 or 34 or something. 34. So yeah, but like the thing is, the reason I'm not running it at 34 right now is like this system is right on the edge of stability. I tried to run settings closer to the hardware bot set, like to the final submission, like to the score settings for like earlier takes of this video, and the system had a bit of a tendency to just kind of crash more often than I wanted it to, so I've sort of backed it off a bit. So yeah, TWR10, TCWL14, TRRDs of course at 4.4, WTRS at 3, WTRL at 8. That might do 7, but it also probably won't make that much of a difference to the performance at this point. And the TRFC on this kit is insane. 212 at 4800 megabits per second. Like, there are memory kits that won't do a TRFC this low at 4000 megabits per second, and this does it at 4800. And yes, it's at 2 volts, but like, this is still really, really low TRFC. Like, this is insanely low TRFC for this speed. So this kit's insane. RTP6, which that's basically as low as that goes. TFAW16, RDWR8. Yeah, that doesn't really go any lower than that. TRRD SCL2, WRDRD2, and then the other SCL is also at 2. TCKE at 1. And then we are in 2T command rate because, well, 1T doesn't work. Of course it doesn't. And it doesn't work even if you enable gear down mode. So at these kinds of speeds, the 2T command rate is, as far as, like, I'm not sure that you can get, like, there's not really many other people pushing settings like this. So I'm not sure if it's possible to do these kinds of settings at 1T at all. Like, it might not be possible. But yeah, or it might be a motherboard thing. This is the first board that I tested this kit on, and but even then, it's like on my other kits, I was also using 2T at this kind of speed. Like, this is just kind of like, yeah, at these kinds of speeds, you go with 2T command rate. Also, Geekbench's memory test is primarily a bandwidth test rather than like a latency test, so the 2T command rate really doesn't hurt very much. And then for the terminations, we're just at 2020, 2024, which is actually what the board will default to. And proc ODT at 40, which is the optimal proc ODT for any 6-layer daisy chain, well, any 6-layer shielded daisy chain gigabyte motherboard. I use this same proc ODT with literally every memory kit I have on literally every gigabyte motherboard that uses this topology. Never had any issues with it. Any of the other proc ODTs are just like, don't. Just don't. No, actually, no, I'm not 100% certain, but my experience has been like 40 ohms or is universal, like has been universally the best setting for me. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you have some weird kit, it might not be best, but yeah, in my experience, like B550 Aorus Master 40 ohms, B550 Vision D 40 ohms, this X570 SA Aorus Master 40 ohms, like always 40 ohms. So yeah, that's what's going on there, and then the rest of the subtimings are just on auto, and yeah, so this is just an absolutely insane kit. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, yeah, 14, 13, 12. Like, my previous best for Geekbench stable, like, memory settings was, like, 15, 13, 12. And this kit will do, like, 14, 13, 12. So, yeah, this kit is insane. And that was actually on the 3700X or, well, one of my 3000 series CPUs, which I think has slightly stronger memory controllers. And also, we're just going to bump that up to 15. Actually, we're gonna do one more thing. Wait, oops. No, I want to drop that back to auto. Didn't mean to change that. I'm gonna go 15, 14. And I want to see if it'll do 4866. Because it should. And that might actually boost the memory score further. The first F9 is normal. You know, it takes a few retries to get it to boot at these kinds of settings. Okay, now we're at F9. So it might not work. But honestly, like... even the, like what it already does is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, straight up, this is the first time I've been able to run 4814. And actually, this is slightly more than 4814. And if I could actually take a B550 board, I think I could push it even further. Because on B550, you can push a lot more BCLK than you can on X570. And the thing with the Ryzen memory controllers is the actual memory ratio seems to change the training behavior somewhat. So a lot of the time, you're actually better off training with a lower memory ratio and a higher BCLK rather than with a higher ratio and like 100 BCLK. But I think it actually booted 486615. Fortunately, that's actually a lot looser than 4814. Though Geekbench being a really like a memory bandwidth benchmark might not care enough because all of our subtimings are still basically the same. Yeah, so that... no, the memory got... yeah, memory went into recovery mode. Okay. Yeah, still, an absolutely insane kit of Samsung B-Die. Like... so... yeah, and this is just like the first board I've tried it on with the first CPU, so I'm like, there's definitely still headroom in this, especially since X570 in my experience really, like, it's mostly the BCLK thing where it's like, oh, you just can't raise the BCLK, which, let's try 100 instead of 103. Okay, now that's still F9s. Yeah, I'd have to probably like redo everything. We're not doing that on this in this video. So yeah, that's basically all I really wanted to show you about this kit. Is just like these 4000 CL14 bins from G.skill are just absolutely insane. There's not much else to say about it, really. Which makes sense. Like, this is a really, really aggressive XMP. So, yeah, if you're, like, I don't think it would make sense as a daily kit, because ultimately, like, compared to some of my other kits, the difference is it literally just does, like, one tick lower primaries. Actually, the TRFC is also really, really low compared to a lot of my other kits, but yeah, like, you know, like compared to other B-Die kits, it's not that much of a difference. It is a difference. It is faster, but it's not that much of a difference. So that's kind of the thing is like, yeah, if you're into competitive overclocking where, you know, like I'm literally losing by 44 points. So that's like, oh yeah, I'm going to swap a motherboard and if I can get like, you know, another, I don't know, like 20 tenths of a megahertz, I might be able to beat the score ahead of me, right? Like that's kind of the scenario where a memory kit like this is just so awesome to have. But for daily, yeah, well, I mean, if you've already got an RTX 3090, you may as well, I guess. But yeah, for me, this is just kind of like benchmark RAM, very much benchmark RAM. And it is really, really good at that. And also, I'm 99% sure it just recovered again. I don't think it trained. Yeah, it's in recovery. Okay. So yeah, that's it for the video. Thank you to G.skill for this absolutely insane kit of Samsung B-Die. Like, yeah, it's just incredible. And Also, thank you to Gigabyte for the X570S Aorus Master, though I think the B550 boards do have an edge. We'll see. Like, now I actually have a really good kit for really testing the limits of every single motherboard because, well, I mean, I have other kits, but they'll do similar settings, but like with 1 tick more latency of basically everything, and then significantly higher TRFC. But yeah, anyway, so thank you to Gigabyte and G.skill, and that's it for the video. So thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the HOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. It would be much appreciated if you'd check that out, since it helps out immensely with running the channel. And yeah, that is it for the video. So thank you for watching, and goodbye.